I never believed in love at first sight. Honestly, I used to think it was just something people say in movies, something that sounds beautiful but doesn't actually happen in real life. But then, one flight changed everything. It was supposed to be a normal trip. Just a few hours in the air, sitting next to a stranger I would probably never talk to. But when he sat down beside me, something felt different. We started talking. At first it was small things, where we were from, where we were going. But somewhere between the clouds and the quiet hum of the plane engine, our conversation became something deeper. We talked about dreams. About heartbreak. About the kind of life we both wanted but hadn't found yet. For a few hours, it felt like I had known him my entire life. And when the plane finally landed, I thought it was just the beginning of our story. But I was wrong. Because after that flight, I never saw him again. And the strangest part, for years, I never forgot him. I still remember the exact day my life quietly changed. It was a cold Friday evening in October. The kind of evening where the sky turns a soft gray and the air feels heavier than usual. I was standing in a long airport security line, half asleep and slightly annoyed. My flight had already been delayed once, and all I wanted was to get to my seat, put on my headphones, and forget the world for a few hours. Traveling had never been exciting for me. For most people, flights are adventures. New cities. New experiences. New beginnings. But for me, flights were just long hours of silence between places that never really felt like home. That day, I was flying back after visiting my sister. The trip had been nice, but something about returning always made me feel strangely empty. You know that feeling when life seems to be moving forward for everyone else, but somehow you're standing still? That was exactly how I felt. People around me in the airport looked busy and purposeful. Families laughing together. Couples holding hands. Friends taking selfies before boarding their planes. And then there was me. Just another traveler with a carry-on bag and too many thoughts. When boarding finally started, I walked slowly down the narrow jet bridge, following the line of passengers. The sound of footsteps echoed softly against the metal walls. I found my seat. 27A, the window seat. My favorite spot. Something about watching the clouds from above always felt peaceful, like the world below didn't matter for a while. I placed my bag under the seat, sat down, and looked outside the small oval window. The runway lights blinked softly in the distance. Passengers continued filling the plane around me, their voices blending together in a quiet hum of conversations and luggage shifting into overhead bins. At that moment, the seat next to me was still empty. And honestly, I hoped it would stay that way. Have you ever secretly wished that no one would sit next to you on a flight? No awkward small talk. No fighting for the armrest. Just silence. But of course, that never happens. A few minutes later, someone stopped beside my row. I heard the soft sound of a suitcase being lifted into the overhead compartment. Then a calm voice spoke. "Excuse me. I think that's my seat." I looked up. And for a second, I just froze. Standing beside me was a tall guy, probably around my age, maybe late 20s. He had slightly messy dark hair, like he had run his hand through it too many times during the day. His jacket looked simple but stylish, and he carried himself with the relaxed confidence of someone who didn't seem to worry too much about what others thought. But what I noticed most were his eyes. They had that strange warmth to them. The kind of eyes that made you feel like the person was genuinely present in the moment. Which is rare these days. Most people look at their phones more than they look at each other. "Oh sorry," I said quickly, moving my legs so he could pass. He smiled politely and slid into the seat next to me. For a few seconds, we both just sat there quietly. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the last passengers boarded. I went back to looking out the window, pretending to be interested in the airport lights. But I could feel that strange awareness you sometimes get when someone new is sitting close to you. Not uncomfortable. Just noticeable. He adjusted his seatbelt and leaned back slightly. Then a few seconds later, he spoke again. "So, do you actually like the window seat?" he said casually, "or do you just enjoy being the first one people wake up when they need to use the bathroom?" I couldn't help it. I laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh, but it was real. And honestly, I hadn't laughed like that in a while. "I like the view," I replied. He nodded toward the window. "Fair point. Clouds do look better from up there than from the ground." For a moment, the conversation paused again. Normally, that would have been the end of it. Just a polite exchange between two strangers who would spend the next few hours in silence. But something about him felt easy. Natural. Like talking to him didn't require effort. A few minutes later, as the plane began slowly moving away from the gate, he turned slightly toward me again. "So," he asked, "are you traveling home, or escaping somewhere?" I looked at him, slightly amused by the question. "Is there a difference?" He smiled. "Usually." And for some reason, that simple conversation was the moment everything quietly began. At the time, I had no idea that the stranger sitting next to me on that flight would become one of the most unforgettable people I would ever meet. And the craziest part, we only had a few hours together. Just one flight. One conversation above the clouds. But sometimes, that's all it takes for someone to change your story forever. A few minutes later, the plane finally began moving faster along the runway. The engines grew louder, vibrating softly beneath our seats. I looked out the window as the city lights blurred into long glowing lines. And then, we lifted off the ground. There's always a strange moment during takeoff where everything feels suspended. Like the world pauses for a second. The plane tilted upward, rising slowly into the dark sky. Within minutes, the busy city below turned into tiny flickering lights, and then disappeared beneath a blanket of clouds. The cabin lights dimmed. Passengers settled into their seats. Some opened their laptops. Some closed their eyes. Others immediately reached for their headphones. For a moment, neither of us spoke. But I could feel that quiet energy again, like the conversation wasn't finished yet. Then he turned slightly toward me. "So," he said, "what's your story?" I raised an eyebrow. "My story?" "Yeah," he said casually. "Everyone has one." I laughed softly. "I think you're giving me too much credit." He shook his head. "No. Everyone has something interesting about them. You just have to ask the right question." I thought about it for a second. "Well," I said, "I work too much. I overthink everything, and I travel alone more often than I probably should." He smiled. "That doesn't sound boring." "Trust me," I replied, "it's pretty average." He leaned back slightly in his seat. Average people don't stare out airplane windows like they're thinking about their entire life. That caught me off guard. Was it that obvious? He nodded. "Just a little." For a moment I felt embarrassed, but strangely, it didn't bother me. Normally, when someone notices too much about you, it feels uncomfortable. But with him, it didn't. It felt natural. So what about you? I asked. What's your story? He looked down at his hands for a moment, thinking. Then he shrugged slightly. I guess I'm still trying to figure that out. That's not a story, I said. He smiled again. Exactly. The flight attendant walked by offering drinks. He ordered a coffee. I asked for water. And somehow, after that simple moment, the conversation just kept flowing. We talked about small things at first. Favorite cities. Places we wanted to visit. Movies we loved. The kind of music we listened to late at night. But slowly, the conversation started changing. It became deeper. More personal. At one point he asked me something I didn't expect. Do you believe in timing? He said. Timing? Yeah, he continued. Like, meeting the right person at the wrong time. I thought about it. I think that happens more than people admit. He nodded quietly. Yeah. I think so too. Something about the way he said that made me curious. Did that happen to you? I asked. He looked toward the aisle for a moment, thinking carefully before answering. Maybe, he said. I didn't push further. Sometimes you can tell when someone isn't ready to explain something completely, but a few minutes later, he asked me another question. This one felt even more personal. Have you ever been in love? For a second, I didn't know what to say. Not because the question was strange, but because it felt unexpectedly honest. Once, I finally said. And? It didn't end well. He nodded slowly. Those usually don't. I laughed softly. Wow, you're optimistic. I'm realistic, he replied. Then he added quietly, but I still believe in it. That surprised me. Love. Yeah. Even after heartbreak. He looked at me for a moment. The kind of look where someone isn't joking anymore. Especially after heartbreak, he said. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Outside the window, the clouds glowed softly under the moonlight. The plane moved steadily through the quiet night sky. And somewhere during that conversation, I realized something strange. I felt comfortable. Completely comfortable talking to someone I had met less than an hour ago. Like we had skipped the awkward parts of meeting someone new. Like we had known each other longer than we actually had. And I could tell, he felt it too. A little later, he looked out the window beside me and said something that stuck in my mind. You know what's weird? What? We might never see each other again after this flight. I smiled slightly. That's how flights work. But think about it, he continued. Two strangers sitting next to each other, sharing their entire life story, and then walking away forever. I shrugged playfully. That's kind of poetic. He laughed. Or tragic. And at that moment, neither of us knew how true those words would become. Because in just a few hours, that exact thing would happen. The plane would land. Our paths would separate. And the stranger sitting beside me, would become someone I would never forget. By the time we finished our drinks, it felt like the flight had somehow become shorter. Or maybe, we had simply stopped noticing the time. Our conversation kept moving from one topic to another. Stories about childhood. Embarrassing school memories. The strange jobs we had both worked in the past. At one point we even argued playfully about which city had the best pizza. But the strange part wasn't what we talked about. It was how easy it felt. Normally, when you talk to someone new, there are pauses. Awkward silences. Moments where you search for something to say. But with him, that never happened. The words just kept flowing naturally. Almost like our minds were moving at the same pace. At some point during the flight, the cabin lights dimmed even more. Most of the passengers around us had fallen asleep. A woman across the aisle had her head resting on a travel pillow. A man a few rows ahead was snoring quietly. And the soft hum of the airplane engines filled the silence. Outside the window, the night sky stretched endlessly. The clouds below looked like an ocean made of silver. He leaned slightly toward the window, looking out. "It's crazy, isn't it?" he said quietly. "What is?" "How small everything looks from up here." I followed his gaze. The ground far below was almost invisible now. Just darkness and faint lights in the distance. "Yeah," I said. "It kind of makes your problems feel smaller too." He nodded. "I wish life worked like that all the time." "What do you mean?" "Like, you could just step back for a second and realize the things you're worried about aren't actually that big." For a moment I didn't answer. Because I understood exactly what he meant. Everyone carries things they don't talk about. Doubts. Fears. Regrets. And somehow, being high above the world made those things feel quieter. A few seconds later he looked back at me. "Can I ask you something weird?" I smiled. "You've already asked me if I believe in love and timing, so I'm ready for anything now." He laughed softly. "Fair point." Then he asked, "Do you ever feel like life is about to change, but you don't know how yet?" That question caught me off guard. I thought about it carefully. "Actually, yeah," I said. "How so?" I hesitated before answering. "I guess sometimes it feels like something important is just around the corner, but you can't see it yet." He looked at me thoughtfully. "That's exactly how I feel lately." "Maybe that's why we're both on this flight," I joked. He smiled. "Maybe." Then something unexpected happened. The plane suddenly shook slightly. Just a quick bump of turbulence. Nothing serious. But enough for a few passengers to wake up and look around. The seatbelt sign lit up again. The pilot's calm voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a little turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The plane shook again for a moment. Instinctively, my hand tightened around the armrest. He noticed immediately. "You okay?" he asked gently. "Yeah. I just hate turbulence." "Same," he said. "But statistically it's still the safest way to travel." "That doesn't make it feel better," I replied. He laughed. "Fair enough." For a few seconds we sat quietly as the plane moved through the uneven air. Then something small happened. But it's something I never forgot. Without thinking, he placed his hand lightly over mine on the armrest. Not in a romantic way. Not in a dramatic way. Just, reassuring. "It'll pass," he said softly. And somehow, it did make me feel calmer. The turbulence faded after a minute. The plane returned to its smooth path through the sky. But neither of us moved our hands right away. It was one of those small moments that feels strangely meaningful. Even though you don't fully understand why. After a few seconds, we both realized it and laughed awkwardly. "Sorry," he said. "No, it's okay." But the atmosphere between us had changed slightly. Not uncomfortable. Just, deeper. Like something unspoken had passed between us. And I think we both felt it. A little later, the pilot announced that we would begin descending soon. The destination city lights were starting to appear below the clouds. That's when the reality of the situation quietly returned. The flight was ending. In less than 30 minutes, we would land. And two strangers who had spent hours talking like old friends, would probably walk away in different directions. At the time, I didn't realize how much that thought would stay with me later. Because sometimes, the most meaningful people in your life appear suddenly. And disappear just as quickly. And you never see them again. The plane touched down with a soft jolt, rolling along the runway as the city lights grew brighter below. I felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Relief because the flight was over, but disappointment because I didn't want this to end. He turned to me as the seat belt sign clicked off. "Well," he said, voice casual, but his eyes betrayed something else, "here we are." I laughed nervously. "Yeah, here we are." We gathered our bags, moving with the stream of passengers toward the exit. The airport was noisy, full of announcements, footsteps, and the occasional laugh from travelers hurrying to reunite with loved ones. And yet, all I could focus on was him. We walked together, side by side, like friends who had known each other forever, though we'd just met hours ago. "Do you want to grab a coffee before you go?" he asked. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say yes, just to prolong this feeling. But another part of me knew, the clock was already against us. I don't know," I said, trying to sound casual. He smiled softly. "I get it." We stopped near the exit. People were scattering in all directions, families embracing, business travelers rushing, couples laughing. But for a moment, it felt like the airport had shrunk just for us. "Hey," he said, stopping and turning toward me. "I know this might sound crazy, but do you think we could keep talking, maybe exchange numbers?" I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "I'd like that." We fumbled with our phones, awkwardly typing in numbers, a moment that felt both ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. Finally, we looked up at each other. And in that instant, I realized something strange. I didn't want him to leave. The idea of never seeing him again felt impossible, but also inevitable. "Promise me something," he asked softly. What I replied. "Promise me you won't forget this, the conversation, tonight, the clouds, everything. Even if we never meet again." I smiled, a little sad, a little wistful. "I promise." And then, the moment came. He had to go. The crowd was separating us. He waved briefly, gave me a small, reassuring smile, and walked toward the exit gates. I watched him disappear into the crowd. And just like that, he was gone. For years, I kept thinking about that flight. The stranger who had shared his thoughts, laughed at my jokes, and somehow made the world feel smaller. I never expected to see him again. And maybe, that was the point. Some people enter your life like shooting stars. Bright, unforgettable, and gone in a blink. But even after they're gone, their light lingers. For me, that light stayed with me. And sometimes, late at night, I still wonder what would have happened if we hadn't parted that day. If we had chosen to follow that strange, fleeting connection. But life has a way of teaching us lessons in the quietest, most unexpected ways. And mine was simple: some love stories don't end with a reunion. Some love stories live on in memory, forever. Years passed. Life moved on in its usual, relentless way. I traveled, I worked, I laughed, I cried, but somehow, a piece of that night on the flight never left me. Every time I saw a plane, every time I watched the clouds, I thought of him. I thought about his laugh, his voice, the way he looked out the window and made the world seem smaller. And yet, I never tried to find him. It felt impossible. Two strangers. One fleeting connection. Maybe some stories are meant to stay unfinished. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Then one day, everything changed. I was attending a conference in a city I barely knew. The kind of event where people shuffle in and out, exchanging business cards and polite smiles. After a long day of sessions, I went to the hotel cafe to get some coffee. And that's when I saw him. He was sitting at a corner table, looking exactly the same, somehow older, yes, but the same warmth in his eyes. For a moment, I froze. My heart raced. Was it really him? Then he looked up. And in that instant, recognition passed between us like a lightning strike. He stood up slowly, smiling that familiar, soft smile. "Hey," he said. His voice carried the same calmness, the same quiet certainty. "Hey," I replied, my voice barely more than a whisper. We both laughed nervously, unsure what to say. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," I said. "Neither did I," he admitted. We sat down together, just like that flight all those years ago. And as we talked, it was as if no time had passed. The same easy conversation. The same laughter. The same little pauses that felt like everything. He told me where life had taken him. The jobs, the cities, the mistakes, the heartbreaks. I told him mine. And somehow, in that crowded cafe, with strangers passing by, the world fell away. The clouds weren't beneath us anymore. But it felt like we were still suspended above the ordinary, caught in the extraordinary moment that had begun all those years ago. Then, quietly, he took my hand. "I never forgot you," he said. "I never forgot you either," I replied, feeling tears prick my eyes. And just like that, the years of longing, the nights of wondering, the memories that refused to fade, all of it came rushing back. We didn't know what the future would hold. But in that moment, it didn't matter. Because sometimes, love doesn't need grand gestures. Sometimes, it only needs timing, patience, and the courage to notice a stranger sitting next to you on a flight. That day, I realized something I had always known in my heart: some connections are meant to last, no matter how far apart life tries to take you. And some strangers become unforgettable.